I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. Kelli Ward, the chair of the Arizona Republican Party, who self-identifies as an ultra MAGA, who is indeed a MAGA extremist who was involved in the January 6th insurrection. She has just filed an emergency application in the United States Supreme Court to stay the enforcement of the January 6th committee's subpoena for her T-Mobile records for a very finite and narrowly tailored date range around the time of the insurrection, pending an overall review by the United States Supreme Court. This comes after Kelli Ward just recently lost before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, who held that the January 6th committee's subpoena should be enforced and that they should get those T-Mobile records, and after she lost in front of the Arizona District Court judge, where she initially filed a lawsuit to block the January 6th committee from getting her phone records. So what took place here? The January 6th committee subpoenaed her phone records, and the actual text messages don't exist anymore. And so what the January 6th committee is asking T-Mobile for, though, is for the phone numbers that called during a very finite and limited date range around the dates of the insurrection and shortly before, the times the calls were made, the duration of the calls, the type of things that you would normally see on the phone bill, which we refer to as metadata. Kelli Ward filed a lawsuit when she got that subpoena in the district court in Arizona, saying that this violated her First Amendment rights of free speech and that as a political leader, this unduly encroached on her privacy interests. The district court, like all rational courts that would hear this, disagreed with Kelli Ward and ordered that she produce these records, or that T-Mobile produce these records to the January 6th committee. She then filed an emergency stay application with the district court pending her appeal to the Ninth Circuit. She lost that. She then filed an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and she just lost in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. There was a panel. A panel was actually made up of one Clinton appointee, one Trump appointee, and one George W. Bush appointee. And in a 2-1 decision with the George W. Bush appointee in the dissent, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals held that the subpoena should be enforced and that T-Mobile needs to hand over these records to the January 6th committee. And the analysis that they made here was first that the First Amendment rights of political affiliation don't exist in this case, where what we are talking about is an insurrection that took place. We're talking about this unlawful conduct that took place, and that we're not even talking about the actual text messages. We're talking about literally the numbers and the duration of the call. So the exacting scrutiny standard that would normally apply to First Amendment challenges asserting that a privacy right of political organizations to communicate, in privately with membership, that the exacting scrutiny standard does not apply here. But then the Ninth Circuit said even if you applied an exacting scrutiny analysis, there is clearly a compelling government interest, a compelling interest by the January 6th committee to get these records, given the fact that what we have at stake here is an insurrection, an overthrow of our democracy, and that there actually is a compelling need, which is one of those factors, and a narrowly tailored subpoena, and the subpoena is only seeking that limited information that I discussed there. And so Kelli Ward, after losing in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, she then appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court it is technically framed as an emergency application to stay, and so it goes in front of, you now know from watching the MeidasTouch Network and my legal reviews here and analysis, that when you file these emergency petitions to the United States Supreme Court after losing in the Court of Appeals, and you're not filing what's called the formal motion for certiorari, which is full oral argument before the Supreme Court, but that takes a lot of time and there's lots of rules for when that could be filed. But that is like a formal petition that can take really, really, really long to happen. An emergency application to the Supreme Court is heard by a supervising Supreme Court justice who oversees a different circuit. So if we talk about the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal, for example, Clarence Thomas oversees that. He's the supervising judge for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal. So emergency applications are made to Clarence Thomas. So in the Trump Mar-a-Lago search warrant matter, after the 11th Circuit ruled against Trump to turn over the 100 top secret classified records, Trump's lawyers filed the emergency application, and that was directed at Judge Clarence Thomas. And Clarence Thomas set a briefing schedule and ultimately denied the relief that Donald Trump wanted after submitting the question to the entire Supreme Court to make a ruling on the issue. Similarly, Lindsey Graham recently filed an emergency application after losing in the 11th Circuit, which said that he needs to testify in the Fulton County grand jury proceeding, and that his speech and debate clause privilege claims that he says that prevents him from testifying before the Fulton County special grand jury doesn't apply to certain categories of questionings, like his exhorting and cajoling the Secretary of State to overturn the results of the election, his communications with Trump, and other public statements. And so he filed an emergency application there with Clarence Thomas, who's the supervising judge, and that is pending a briefing schedule before Clarence Thomas, and the Fulton County prosecutors will be filing their response shortly. Now, here in the 9th Circuit, though, like the 7th Circuit, for example, you had Amy Coney Barrett, and she oversees the 7th Circuit. In the 8th Circuit, it's Judge Kavanaugh who oversees the 8th Circuit. In the 5th Circuit, it's Justice Alito. In the 9th Circuit, it's Elena Kagan. So you have Justice Kagan is the judge, an Obama appointee, and really all of these judges should be rejecting these emergency requests. These emergency requests have often been referred to as the shadow docket, because in the past, procedurally, all these emergency requests mostly should just get rejected. But more frequently, under the Roberts Court, there has been a frequent pattern of MAGA Republican judges or right-wing judges who would accept emergency applications and rule on emergency applications, which would have the effect of actually making significant rulings on cases like injunctions and things that actually were outcome determinative on cases, without the full oral argument that normally is supposed to take place during the various terms of the Supreme Court through the process whereby the Supreme Court grants certiorari or denies certiorari, where they normally reject like 95 or 96% of the cases, that maybe even more sometimes, that come before it, that this kind of fast tracks these MAGA emergency appeals, and they don't have to go through the normal process, and substantive rulings are being made. That's called the shadow docket. So what do I think Justice Kagan is going to do? So Kelli Ward had to direct this to Kagan the same way Trump had to direct the 11th Circuit emergency application to the supervising judge, Clarence Thomas. So with a high degree of confidence, I will tell you that Justice Kagan is not going to grant the relief. I don't think she's going to send it to the full court. I think Justice Kagan is just going to outright deny it, which is what these judges should do in any event. These judges should just absolutely deny it. They don't have merit. It's not an issue of any emergency relief being necessary. There's no probability of success on the merits. The 11th Circuit, like when within the Trump situation, and here the 9th Circuit did not make a ruling that was like absolutely wrong and incorrect. So Justice Kagan is not going to overturn what the 9th Circuit did there. She's not going to grant an emergency application, and Kelli Ward is going to lose again. But I want you to reflect on this too. Kelli Ward and all these MAGA extremists are fighting awfully hard not to turn over records, not to, what in the world are you doing other than serious criminal conduct in terms of who you're communicating with on or around January 6th insurrection, that you are fighting this hard not to turn over these records. Same question with Lindsey Graham. It's like, what in the world were you doing? You are a senator from South Carolina. What in the world? We know the answer, but you are engaged in such heinous and despicable conduct in Georgia that you're so terrified to have to even testify, that you're claiming speech and debate clause privileges because you're so... In the normal course, it should be, hey, what'd you do in Georgia? Nothing. I'm a South Carolina senator. Or, hey, what'd you do to interfere with the election in Arizona? Nothing. I'm a Republican national chair. You shouldn't be involved in insurrectionist activity like that. But Kelli Ward absolutely has something to hide. I look forward to Justice Kagan very swiftly rejecting this emergency application by Kelli Ward. And I look forward to the January 6th committee getting their records, getting these phone records and having access to them. So I think that will happen in due course. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button now. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. And check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Great exclusive content there. We are not funded by millionaires or billionaires or any outside funders. We're purely fueled by democracy. We are purely fueled by you. So if you want to help out, I always get asked that, how can you help? Go check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
MeidasTouch is unapologetically pro-democracy. And look, we know you are too. So please make sure you check out our best-selling shirt and our best-selling gear, the unapologetically pro-democracy gear. And hey, while you're at it, make sure you check out my favorite shirt and one of our most famous designs, It Wasn't Rigged, You're Just a Loser, at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.